recently I also bought my house in Belgium, so maybe I'll be moving there end of this year. So I'm trying to take advantage of that, the difference between cross-border, yeah. I haven't done that. My colleagues are doing it. They live in Belgium because it's cheaper. That property market has surged up big time in recent two years. So what people are doing it, they're buying houses in Belgium or Germany and they're working here. Or they're buying cars in Belgium because they are cheaper than Netherlands, and they drive bigger cars as compared to Dutch cars.
Borders have always been associated with smuggling, bringing in stuff from over there and selling it cheap and tax-free over here. But here, playing the system, be it in houses or cars or cigarettes, isn't smuggling. There's no cross-border taxes to avoid. Maastricht is both populated by tens of thousands of people from other countries and is forging ahead with its economic and cultural relationships with the places many of them come from: Germany, Belgium, and many others. But, despite all this, have Maastricht and other EU cities truly moved into a post-border world? I put this to Professor Notter.
When you get a situation like the European Union arising, and in particular the Benelux countries, is it possible to dream that John Lennon dream of imagining no countries, which I personally find problematic because of its difficulty? Do you think that area of Europe and the EU in general has gone further than anywhere else in history?
I'm not so sure, but there's also a lot of propaganda in it. This is also a kind of a myth. The reality is, of course, that there are no passport controls, so we have no wars in that sense. But the history and all kinds of regulations on a lower scale are so different between countries that it's a myth to see Europe as a region without borders.
I know comparisons also, well, there's an English expression, comparisons are odious. They're also difficult because sometimes they're too broad brush, but they do work sometimes. So let me try one. The United States, larger than the European Union, similar population size, but one dominant culture because it's one country. Do you think somebody from, example, Massachusetts is more like somebody from Texas than, let's say, somebody from southern Italy is to somebody in Finland?
I think so. There are many commonalities in the United States, considered themselves as one country, under God, I think. And so we have the same flag. They try to stimulate national feeling in all of the states. Same time, the differences are huge, of course, but I think because of the specific history of nation states in Europe, the differences between Finland and Italy are much larger than between Massachusetts and Texas.
A key difference between Italy and Finland that doesn't trouble the citizens of Massachusetts and Texas is language. You can bring down physical barriers, but linguistic ones, not so easy. Maz, who we heard from earlier, runs the expat social organisation Internations in Maastricht. It has over 4,000 members, speaking dozens of languages between them.
The Dutch are very well known. Even if you try to practice your Dutch, if they saw you struggling, they would shift automatically with you to English. They are really diverse and welcoming people. Okay, German, they try with you, whether English, any possible language. Sometimes you do not succeed. But when you go for Walloon, yes, you could find some difficulty because they are a bit fuzzy about the French.
Fuzzy is one way of putting it. Maastricht is not only at the confluence of three countries, but also borders one of the bitterest linguistic cultural divides in Europe. Louis Baston again.
It sits on one of Europe's very old kind of fault zones, the Franco-German kind of middle, this line between different language groups to sort of civilizational models in a sense. There are sort of mutual dependencies, but people retain their identity. I think there are some quite interesting things, for instance, when border towns start to become very mixed with people from the other side. You have towns like Vaals in the Netherlands, which are effectively suburbs of Aachen. and are populated by sort of 25% plus Germans. And you have the Vuren area in Belgium where Dutch people kind of want to live, to commute into Maastricht. So the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, very large proportions of people speak English, particularly in any kind of professional context, and given the importance of higher education in Maastricht, that's important. You've got English being the kind of primary language, and it softens some of these historic divides, like the one within Belgium, somewhat. I mean, you find more people on the Flemish side of the line speaking good English than on the... English is sometimes a cop-out if you want to avoid getting into linguistic trouble. English is this solvent to these differences.
The language is an expression of your culture and your past. So I think you shouldn't try to force these languages away. So you have to respect them and build your society around them. For example, we now have projects which we call buurttalen. We teach children German and French at primary school already, so that they can be able, if there's a job in Liège, which is in Belgium, only 20 minutes drive from here, and they can have a job over there speaking French. You have to realize that even in this city, within the Maastricht dialect, there are different ways of pronouncing words or using words. So it's really the heart of how we are.
But how we are is that everyone speaks English. As Louis Baston mentioned, the fear of French, Dutch, German, or a local dialect being a barrier to business, life, or progress means another language altogether has become the lingua franca in a region where the franca is one of the local indigenous languages. Mind you, it can get politicians into trouble. Mayor Pente Straka again.
I remember when we, maybe you know Tom Dumoulin, which is a cyclist, and he won the Giro. It was 2017, I think, and we had this big banner on the city hall, and it said "Perficia Tom Dumoulin," which is the Maastricht word for congratulations, and congratulations Tom Dumoulin. And then all the people from the media came from the rest of the Netherlands and said, well, this is idiot. Where is the Dutch language? Well, it wasn't there. And this says a lot about how we live here.
For all the talk of corporations replacing the nation state, most of us are still tied to it via our taxes, and many of us rely on it for jobs, security, pensions, and welfare.
To have a world without borders?
Yes.
I think it's quite difficult. States have become more and more important in daily lives of people. Social services, education, all kinds of things that people take for granted, which are self-evident, but which in reality are nationally organized.
And yet at the turn of the century, it was very fashionable to argue that the nation-state was going...
Yeah, the globalization would mean the end of the nation-state. But
my response to that was, if somebody burgles your house, you're not going to ring Google.
I think in the 19th century borders were less important, but in the 20th century people are more wary of preserving that, so immigration becomes more difficult. The passports are introduced because of this strengthening of the national states. I think this has not ended with more globalization or Europeanization.
Al and Rashid were all born out. Hail the blessings of playing the tri-national differences in goods and services to their advantage. But the point is they feel Dutch, Belgium and Germany are places they go for other reasons and recognise them as different. A key test of integration is when it goes beyond the commercial or casual and people from either side of the line start creating families together, rubbing away at lines of deep difference. But there's little evidence this is happening much in Maastricht. Of the 700,000 mixed marriages in the Netherlands, less than 44,000 involve a Belgian partner, for example, compared to the 160,000 that have an Indonesian one. Kim works in a bar in Maastricht.
I guess it depends on what you like or something like that. We do visit like a party here and there or concerts, but it's just because our Dutchies tend to stick with Dutchies as well. It's a Dutch thing. But I mean, it depends on the age. I guess older people stick to older people in the Netherlands as well. But for me, for instance, I love connecting with the German people or Belgian people.
Everyone we spoke to agrees that the people of Maastricht are very friendly and good mixers, but even if borders have been removed in the physical world of this Euro region, there are limits. Imagine there's no countries.
The Dutch are welcome.
We'll embrace each other, we'll sort of cooperate, but I mean, we will remain ourselves. Identities will be separate. There is this sort of natural human thing to kind of have a tribe, which is your tribe. And when they're dealing with each other, Maastricht people, Aachen people, Liège people, Worens people, Kelmis people, they all sort of preserve their differences quite jealously. I think when they talk to Berlin or Amsterdam or Brussels, then you see some of the things coming together. I mean, we are at our most united in any group when somebody outside doesn't understand us or is having a go at us. And I think it's quite often like that with these border regions.
Differences matter, yeah. And if you, as long as you're afraid of differences, they will bother you. You will suffer from them. But as soon as you can embrace them and look at the possibilities of all these differences, the life will become richer. Yeah.
You've been listening to On the Border on the BBC World Service with me, Tim Marshall. Next time, we'll be at Niagara, the busiest crossing point on the longest border in the world.
This is the BBC World Service, remembering the lives of 3 black men killed by police in the USA.
I'm Cornelius Eady. I've been speaking to 3 father figures of victims of police shootings as they remember their loved ones. It's a tale of precious memories, harrowing loss, and finding a way out of no way.
Father Figures, Tuesday at 8 and 19 GMT. At 2:50 GMT, Witness History.
With me, Alex Collins, I'm taking you back to 2011 when Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit was released from captivity in Gaza. He was held for more than 5 years.
Stay with us. Outlook is next. This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station. Today on Outlook, how the Fab Four inspired a young boy in Cuba. For Nilo Núñez, it all started with a photograph.
In the photo, there were 2 men with guitars, and other 2 men standing up. And the owner of the house said to me, "They are the Beatles. They're the greatest, most famous band in the whole world right now."
That same year, 1970, Nilo also heard his first Beatles song, and that sealed the deal. He wanted to become a professional musician, but in a tightly controlled Cuba, he was forced to source his kit on the black market.
I remember there was a musician who used to say, "I have a speaker." He would put it inside a bag of cement, as though someone was going to do some repair work, and then he would open the bag of cement and the instrument would be in there.
And eventually, he'd have to leave his home and travel thousands of miles to make his dream a reality.